this isn't a vacation. What you're doing with your puppy, you need to look at it as something that has to be scaled. What is up, champion puppy owners? Do you really want to streamline ownership experience? Do you really want a socialized dog with manners, responsiveness, and general life skills? Great, you're in the right place. This podcast is for accountable puppy owners who want to better know and grow their dogs. Time to put on your big girl panties, buckle up, and ride with me. Pat Quinn, the founder and creator of the Champion Puppy Training System. Let's go. Welcome back to the Champion Puppy Training Podcast. So this podcast is meant to have you listen to it intensely for maybe about a month or two, and then I want you just to enjoy the fruits of your education and labor, and hopefully it's a labor of love as you're learning your dog, you're growing with your dog. My hope is that as you move closer towards understanding my system and you move your dog closer to the goals of my system, if you can picture like a triangle, and the Champion Puppy Training System is at the top, part of that triangle. You're on one side at the bottom and your dog's on the other side currently. And as you grow your puppy, he moves up his side of the triangle. Let's say it's on the right and you're on the left, and you just continue to understand and implement and learn. As you move closer towards my system at the top, you guys are moving closer together. I'm bonding you guys. And so again, my hope is that people don't listen to this and not implement. My goal is to have you soak up this content, maybe even listen to this podcast a second time, as some of this stuff can make a lot of sense, but it's almost like an episode of The Simpsons, or even better, like the Bible. Depending on the season that you're at in your life, different things will jump out at you. What I'm going to talk about today is communication during a training session. What I often do is teach through analogies, and the analogy that I use as you're initially rolling out training with a puppy is they're almost like a new employee. So I own some businesses. I initially was god-awful horrible with hiring and training, and we're getting much better over the years to the point where that's probably going to be a big part of my actual business model, is simply, like even training other people's employees and stuff like that, because I just love it so much now, because I went through so many painful points of being horrible at it. And a lot's true with me with puppies as well, where I used to, push puppies maybe a little bit like too much. And it was more a lack of motivation or lack of comprehension on their end, where they were really trying and I just didn't see it. And the good news is it's not like I was a complete jerk, but again, the good news is that almost everybody goes through these same learning steps. All trainers, puppy owners, if they actually get to the point where they're proficient with getting responsiveness from their dog. But the main difference is that I've learned from it, so that way you guys don't have to make those mistakes. What I would do is I would just not see these little tells that a puppy was giving me, that they weren't being disobedient. They were trying, but they were just like throwing the wrong thing out, or they were like motivated and or like past like a certain point where it was really good. Like now I would much rather have a dog that's like crazily motivated and just very punchy than have a dog that isn't enthusiastic about engaging. Before I even come out to a training client's house, if I'm training them locally, or if I'm training a dog at a seminar, I spend extra time with that client to make sure that their dog can actually perform in front of a crowd full of people, because that's a lot of stimuli. Before I'll even engage with a dog, I'll make sure that they're ready to eat. As I tell my clients, we start at the belly. Then from there, we work our way into your dog's mind as we start to get into what I call like this puppy chess, or like dog puzzles, is your dog's just going through a medley of commands trying to figure out, okay, what can I do to get that food? What does this guy want from me? And then they just get lost in it. Have you ever been like lost in a project? Like I'm kind of, I get ingrained with learning how to upload podcasts and and all this new technology, and I can spend hours, like the better part of a day, messing around with this stuff. Or before, when I used to do my own projects, like I basically built our first kennel. I would spend like 8 hours up until like the wee hours of the morning, like putting these like these tile jobs together, or flooring, or like spackling, and I just get lost in it. We want your puppy to, again, just get lost in the tinkering with, the figuring out, and just to the point where it might be you would maybe rather eat the food straight out of a bowl and just eat it right away because he gets what he wants quicker. But he also learns to get lost in the game and kind of enjoy the game. And there's some working breeds out there that I've worked with, and they refuse to eat. They would literally boycott unless their owners would train them. And so I remember getting a call from this client in Philadelphia, and they were like, Pat, my German Shepherd, and this dog was an adult dog. This was when I would train like any scenario. My radius where I would travel was a lot further. This was earlier on in my career. And they said, she's not eating unless we train with her. And I said, okay, well, you don't have to like do a bunch of small reps. Just do like 3. And then we went down to 2, and then like 1 sit stay at the food bowl. But this Shepherd was so thirsty for mental stimulation and bonding and thinking and all that it like boycotted eating. And they had a little bit of a working bloodline, so it wasn't like a tried and true working bloodline Shepherd, but its dog had some nodes of it apparently in its system. So anyway, the goal, as we're getting ingrained in, like, let's start with food-based training. We'll talk about food-based training today, because that's where you're going to start. So you're going to start at food-based training, and then from there, what you do with food, you can do the same thing with gameplay, because it's very important that there's scalability in your starting point. So if you're ever starting a business or starting a career, or let's say even if you're going on vacation, you want to get to the said destination, but where do you want to scale from there? Like, what cool thing are you going to do if you go to the Carolinas? And maybe that's not for everybody. Maybe some people like to go to, get to the Outer Banks and park their butt and throw a few back and just, soak up the sun. But this isn't a vacation. What you're doing with your puppy, you need to look at it as something that has to be scaled. So there's a difference, right? As I'm throwing those 2 analogies out there at you, like starting a business, which is very goal oriented. And if you're not growing, you're dying. Someone else is going to, pop open an open sign in front of their storefront, and they're going to eat your lunch. So as I was throwing out those 2 analogies, it actually worked out pretty good, where this isn't a vacation where you just say, okay, I'm going to go through this training session, punch the puppy training time clock, and just, start to mess around. Because what will happen is that squirrel, that other dog, that guest, the list goes on and on and on. As you know, if you're currently in the middle of being tormented by your puppy's development versus driving the process, owning it, and feeling confident, there's a million different things that you're going to have to compete with. You very much need to have scaling, the ability to have your dog respond just as well, if not better, around distractions and at a distance and for longer periods of time. That has to be in your mind during that first rep that you have with that dog. And the only way you're going to do that is by putting a little 2.5 pound plates on that bar as you continue to add the weight on, so to speak, to your to your puppy's environmental distractions, situational distractions, its responsiveness. You're just going to move ahead in baby steps. What can often happen with clients that I've noticed over the years is they get a little bit of responsiveness from their dog, and then they start pushing versus just continuing to move in nice little baby steps. And that's what I'll do. I mean, I tell my clients, listen, I know you're super excited that you're starting to see some results, but I want you to move in baby steps more, because you got this food that you were putting down. Literally, your dog would like sit in the crate for the better part of the day, or maybe even worse than that, like, run around the house terrorizing things and getting into stuff that he shouldn't have gotten into. and you're just plopping a food bowl down in front of your dog, and now we're actually using your dog's dry kibble to train, you're holding out on your dog. Who cares? It was something that it was getting just 150 pieces all at once for nothing. Where now it's like, okay, yeah, like let's decrease that time in between rewarding and not push your dog so much. But that is where the sort of like art of dog training comes in, where you learn how to squeeze. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say for management, right? I need to squeeze the most out of every like staffing hour, out of every advertisement, out of everything I do to survive. And you need to kind of squeeze in regards to being able to push your puppy to that point where it's right about to break that sit stay, that you're maybe watching its chest move forward and you're seeing it kind of pulsate back and forth as it's doing its darndest to maintain that self-control, but it's struggling. You're going to know where you can take it and when you should say break or give the come command. And you're also going to know when your dog's going to fail and not be surprised by it. I was at a training session this weekend, and I knew I was pushing the dog a little bit too far, like in regards to calling it over to me without wearing a leash. I did the whole getting its attention and then gave the command come. I have a certain process for that I'm not going to go into. And the dog just sat there and looked at me. And immediately the owner who I tasked with training this dog that I poured into, and I told her to hit these milestones, and she didn't. Instead, she blamed her family, and it was better. She was very happy. I mean, they gave me compliments out the wazoo, but she starts laughing. And there's times, and I gotta catch myself when I do this, but I almost tell my clients who pay me their hard-earned money, I'm just like, it's not funny. Like, I just flat out, I'm like, you're missing it, and they're missing that teachable moment, both mainly for them. And the other reason why I say, like, basically knock it off, it's not funny, is because it was your job. I tasked you with prepping the dog where I wouldn't have to go back and use the leash and kind of spot the dog in its responsiveness to come when called. And so there's going to be different points where that your dog isn't at the ability to either hold a sedentary position, maybe in a sit stay, or maybe maintaining eye contact with you. And then also knowing when, like, there's no chance in heck that this dog is going to choose me over that said distraction. Normally I'll use like the squirrel as that, like, just like X, that variable. That's where you can use the tool like a leash, or you can use verbal encouragement as you're praising your dog, or you might use body language in my system, which again I'm not going to get into now because that's a whole separate podcast that I can't wait to bring to you. But just knowing your puppy's like point where it can't get that bar off its chest if it's doing a bench press, and when you need to actually come in and offer some level of guidance, whether that be via, again, like verbal encouragement, because a lot of times you can praise your dog and they'll start running to you. But most clients, or I shouldn't say most clients, but most people, just because you're listening to this doesn't mean you're my client, but I'm going to treat you as if you are and expect a lot from you, because I know you can achieve it and that your dog is more than capable if you just can commit yourself. Anyway, what often happens is they'll wait for the dog to start to come to them, and then they'll start praising their dog. And the problem with that is a lot of times that enthusiasm, your initial enthusiasm with praise, will get your dog to come over to you. So I'm going to play in a future podcast just some recordings, just straight up audio recordings of me coaching my clients and giving them all like these like tidbits of information. And you'll see where when we're doing like coming when called, I'm like, start praising your dog. And they'll say, but he's not coming to me yet. And I said, doesn't matter. You praising him is what gets that dog to you. So sometimes dogs need guidance just through sheer energy. And sometimes that can be your facial expressions or moving backwards, and that invites them into your space. Sometimes they need guidance by the reverse of that, where you're kind of posturing towards them. But going back to communication during a training session, it needs to be constant at first. So when I onboard a new employee, remember I told you at that first podcast, I'll go down a rabbit hole, but I'll almost always bring it back home. When I'm onboarding a new employee, we give them a lot of feedback. So it's nonstop all day, asking them questions about what we just told them, having them re-explain things that we just went over with them, role playing. And then we're going to constantly tell them, you're doing great. You keep it up. Or we'll say, hey, in this area, you're showing a little bit of a deficit, but this is how we're going to work past it. And we're super light with them because they're very vulnerable at that point. The same deal with your dog is at first you're going to give constant feedback and you're going to set the standards so low where you just care more about clarity and concept. Like I don't need my employees crazy hustling right off the bat, but I want them to look around and say, hey, like I understand the philosophical like approach here or the culture here. You guys hustle. And so I know that right now I'm under protected status that like I'm being poured into, but hustle day is coming. And that's going to be like the second part of our rollout and part of my training. But they're more just picking up that level of comprehension about just like the broad brushstrokes. And so same's true with your puppy. They're going to understand, okay, this guy, he always wants me to either like sit and like wait for him, or he wants me to right by his side. Like it's either like one or the other. And so you'll start to see where in your dog's mind, you might do like coming when called, like boom, 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 and doing like a medley of training around coming when called. And then all of a sudden you'll put him in a sit stay and he'll be like, what's up, dude? You like I thought I got rewarded for being by your side. And then he starts to get like come alive to the concept of, oh, okay. So sometimes you want me to stay here. And then going back to that praise that I was mentioning, sometimes I'll praise a dog as they're coming to me. I'm like, yeah, buddy, good boy, like as they're coming on over to you, just so I can make sure I got Tigger coming over to me and not Eeyore, because if the dog just putts up to me, I can't get a good boom sit as soon as they get to me, which is what I require when I do coming when called for my puppies. Then there's other times where I praise when a dog is making eye contact with me. In my system, what I call claiming. And so there's going to be times where I put a dog in a sit stay and I claim that looking at me, that stare. And you'll see there's an initial point of a dog's development, like without fail, that when I start praising that dog, it starts to come to me. And obviously now that since I just explained it like that, you understand why. That up until then, what the formula was when I praise you, come over to me rapidly with a high level of enthusiasm. Now that means, at least in this said scenario, just keep that eye contact. And so as you train your dog, at least in my system, and I can only imagine before I really developed my system, there was a lot of nuances and caveats to, hey, in this scenario, it means one thing. In this scenario, it means something completely different. It's all situational. So that's at the onset of this podcast when I was mentioning that I used to think a dog was just being non-compliant. And then I actually took a step back and I looked at what I was communicating. And I was like, and what the dog was actually trying to do. It was trying to give me what I wanted. It wasn't being like passive aggressive or any like personified like scenario. He wasn't, being bullheaded or anything like that. It was just, he was throwing out stuff that he thought was what I was looking for. Oh yeah, so the analogy that I typically use for the situational communication, if you're in a relationship where you say I love you to your spouse, fiance, significant other, whatever, and that can have a couple different contexts. It can be like, yup, babe, I love you, and I'm gonna love you for life, and things are great, and very happy to be with you. And then also, I love you can mean I had to say it, because if I don't say it as I'm getting off the phone with you, I get in trouble. You'll call me back, and then it'll be like, And so obviously, we want to just think about the context that we're throwing out certain things that might mean the same thing, and depending on how we're using it. So I always go back to that "I love you" thing, because it's one that, as a married man, I got to make sure that when I say like "I love you" to my wife, that I'm not using something that it should be said very with a lot of meaning behind it. Just using it, and not just in a unmeaningful way, but in a counterproductive, mean, nasty way. As what can happen sometimes is, we play games in relationships, and when we're not our best selves. And so that's where, again, you'll see me bring in analogies from all over my life, because I try to be my best self. I'm not always, believe me, but I try to be my best self, and I want the same for my champion puppy owners, and of course our champions. So, with communication during a training session, I want it to be rapid at first, where the rewarding process is happening a lot. In my system, I always will say yes before I put my hand in my pocket and give my dog food. So there's a couple caveats to that. Like if I'm doing like the look command, we use the food as a decoy. If we do food throw, which is a drill I do to have a dog sit and stay initially, eventually it's a sit, stay, and stare to be released to go and get the food that they want. And the reason why we do that is it's a great carryover for sit, stays, and stares for when we do retrieval, as well as training with tug. But mainly, you're not going to put your hand in your pocket until you say yes, which is the actual reward marker. Good means hang in there. I'm eventually going to say yes. So the analogy that I use for good is let's say you're an attorney at a law firm, and you didn't get made partner yet. You didn't get an actual monetary promotion, but you got the corner office, right? So what's coming next. As long as you keep working 90-hour weeks and winning cases and bringing on big cases to your law firm, you're gonna get that name on the side of the building. That yes, right? That's exactly what good is. So good means hang in there. I'm eventually gonna say yes. Once you say yes, then your hand can move towards your pocket. But I want the rewarding process to be not just about the food. When I compensate my employees, it shouldn't just be about the pay. It should be about the whole just the whole process of making them feel welcomed, appreciated, like they're making a difference. Again, giving them space to grow. There's all these different things I can do as an employer to engage my employees so they show up for something more than just a paycheck. And obviously through interviewing and in that rollout that I'm talking about, I really seek to develop that. But if you don't do it at time of rollout, then you have to go back and wean off in a way that's a little bit more where you actually have to get through some tipping points and use the leash more and some other guidance-based things. It just makes it a little bit longer when you're getting to the actual proofing stage around distractions if you don't initially start in with praise as you're rewarding your dog with food. So food is just one of many rewards. Anything your dog wants, you can spin to have it be a reward. So what I like to do is as you're feeding your puppy during that rewarding process. So let's say he's coming over to you, you're moving back, you're like, good boy, because you want him to come to you quicker and you want him to keep coming to you. And then he runs up to you, you do a couple other things that I have in my system. You have him do a sit stay. The second he sits, yes, boom, you mark that, his butt hitting the ground. Then as you're putting your hand into your pocket, maybe to grab food, and I'll talk about how best to have food on you. I'll give you a tidbit now, but basically I want you to put food either in your dominant hand pocket. So if you're wearing jeans, put it in your, let's say if you're right-handed, put it in your right pocket. And then if you're wearing a hoodie, if it's a little bit cool where you're at or cold, you can just put it in the right part of your front hoodie pocket. So you say yes once that dog gets to you, and then you put your hand in your pocket. And as you're feeding your dog, I want you to praise them verbally and pet them. So physically, the actual touch. And this is where I basically want you to starve your dog of affection a little bit and feed it right on time. So it's both wants that food, it wants that praise. And so it's not getting that praise just for jumping on you. If you're praising your dog for jumping on you and it's like a little bit more fun, at least currently, as your dog hasn't been developed to like love these games yet and really just get in the zone with you, your dog is going to, on a scale, like to jump on you and get pet more than it likes to like initially work for its food. But again, initially it's a little bit of work for your dog, but pretty soon you'll see what I mean. Both you and your dog should get lost in this time together, where I coach my clients like, yo, you got to watch the time. You've been training this dog for like 15 minutes. Cut it at like 8 minutes, 10 minutes. Get a little bit ahead and then quit your training session so you don't belabor points. So while you pet your dog as it's eating its food during this rewarding process, you're getting your dog not just used to like seeking out that touch, right? That it's not getting as much throughout the day. And thus it has a higher level value on it. And it's like in your dog's mind, it's getting that during certain points. Like I know when I go to Disney, I make special memories with my kids. That's why I pay so much money to go to Disney and I don't skimp on it. I know and expect that going into that said like scenario. I expect those feelings. I expect to like have like reflect on pictures that are just amazing like years from now. And so your dog in a little bit more of an instinctual primal way is going to come into this like time like spent with you, really sort of bask in that praise if you have it set up to be that way. So you want to make it an experience just like Disney does. What I like most about it, above and beyond like making sure that you're withholding praise and affection, that your dog gets for either bad behavior, which is god awful horrible. Again, your dog jumps on you and you pet it because it demands it and does something bad to get it. So ultimately you're training your dog to jump on you, or just freely because your dog's cute. So there's like two varying degrees as to like, horrible and then just like sloppy. Again, horrible is when your dog jumps on you and you pet it and praise it, and sloppy is just, your dog's cute, so you pet it. I can tell you that your dog will be even cuter when it's sitting there staring at you and saying, what do you want me to do next? As you're feeding your dog, it's imperative that you pet your dog. Yes, for the reasons I already mentioned, but this is a great time to sneak in touch where your dog's not going to nip you. A lot of times owners say, well, my dog's nipping me, Pat. And I say, okay, well, you tell me when your dog's nipping you, and I'll tell you what to do. You tell old Pat, I'll be able to give you some advice or show you what to do. And I know it's basically like a trap, right? Because I've been here with enough owners, and there's some legit times where owners are doing everything they need to do as a manager and as a coach, and their dog's still nipping them. And then I do give them just some straightforward advice. But most of the time in my system, once you start managing your dog well, you stop getting the cart in front of the horse. You start having your dog at these said stations. And then you start coaching your dog, pouring into your dog, teaching it all these life skills. Your dog just stops nipping you. Like very rarely do I have to do no-base training in my system. So anyway, they say, Pat, when I pet my dog, it nips my hands. And I say, well, when are you petting your dog? Well, when it's like basically demanding it or I'm just holding it. And I said, well, you got to sneak it in while you're working your dog. And then from there, it's more focused on the food. And so your praise is secondary. So it just gets used to being touched and not nipping back. Because these dogs, they're like the Three Stooges. So if you're like a millennial and listening to this, maybe you know a little bit about the Three Stooges. But basically, there's like these three brothers, Curly, Moe, and Larry, who would like smack the crap out of each other and like poke each other in the eyes and like push one brother over the other brother, so they fall, sort of deal, like pranksters. And once one of these guys would start it up, then the other one would reciprocate. And actually, now that I say that, we're a lot like that in my house, where my daughters do combat sports, and I'm always constantly like, doing a fake takedown as I'm making pancakes for them or something like that. And so my wife's like, on the mat, so like basically me and my two daughters were like the Three Stooges. But anyway, once you pet your dog, it's genetically predisposed to nip back. I mean, it's a playful little creature. And the reason why they do that is so they can work on their skills, their quickness, and those abilities to survive. I mean, they're a predatory animal. So that play And that's why I believe in combat sports. I believe that there's a warrior in everybody and that we have that as part of our being. And I want to tap into that. I think it makes me a better, dad, a better business owner, just, I'm a more fulfilled individual if I can, beat the crap out of a bag on a daily basis. That's for like a different part of you bettering your life if you don't already partake in sports where people are trying to punch you and you're trying to punch other people or grappling or something else. Anyway, these puppies, they need that, right? But we want to work that through tug and gameplay. But on the flip side, we want to have them ignore it. So I want the best of both worlds. And even for me, like I used to get in a lot of fights as a teenage boy. I was just, class clown and the bully all wrapped up into one. Like I was an idiot when I was younger. Once I started boxing and then like messing around with MMA, then I haven't been in a street fight since. And you'll find the same is true, that once you start playing tug with your dog as well as like petting it while you're like giving it its reward, that food, then it's going to stop nipping you. It's fulfilled. It's getting it out of its system. It is finite. It might seem as your dog's nipping you and you have no system, you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall, that it's an infinite amount of nipping, but it's only got so much in there. So anyway, that's a great time to sneak in praise. You're going to feed your dog sometimes once, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times. Like that song, once, twice, 3 times a food reward. I think that's how it goes. Anyway, you're going to feed your dog in a casino style fashion. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's going to get one piece of kibble and then boom, you're just going to move on to the next drill you're going to do with it, to the next rep. And then other times you're going to sit there and just keep putting your hand back in your pocket rapidly. Just like, yeah, there you go. Like, that's mommy's little boy, or, and just like fuss over that dog. And then like from there, you're immediately going to stop and then like move on to the next rep. But after doing it once, twice, and 3 times in a sporadic manner, again, casino-like, you're eventually just going to praise it. And then from there, like you're just going to work that 4th zero amount of food in there, and then you're going to wean off, and then maybe you're just going to go from like, feeding it twice, and then once, and then 0 times, and 3 times, and then once, and 0. Like you're just going to skip around, and you're going to base that around your dog's motivation level. And like, let's say if there's like a bus coming down, I'm training a dog outside, I might just sit there and just like have a dog do something, and like right on time, boom, it gives me that sit, stay, stare. And as that bus is going by and I know it's going to like hit a pothole and have that loud diesel engine, I'm just going to sit there and just feed a dog like 7 like pieces of food, like boom, 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 like one right after the other. So that way I can just sit there and maintain that stare, or even just that puppy's attention, because I know in that moment, like I have that dog and I don't want to give up its attention. And simply getting in those one-off scenarios where you're just kind of like jackpotting a dog, not because it did something great per se, right? It didn't just give you something like a backflip, but it's not getting skitsy around, the FedEx truck. It's not that's going past it if you're training a dog on the sidewalk or something like that, or in your front yard. If you think about it, that's a pretty big feat for a dog. So yeah, it didn't do anything but sit there and not move in a sedentary position. And that might not seem like it's as good as a backflip. Backflips are a little bit more showy, a little bit more flashy. But I would rather have a dog just sit there and stare at me, versus a dog who can do a backflip, but that's kind of a little bit obnoxious with its behavior and hard to control throughout the rest of the day. So for me, again, I'm not flashy. Like I want life skills that make your dog's life better and your life easier. Feedback is, you're just going to think about rolling out your initial training sessions as just a lot of little like, I want this. Nope, I don't want that. Yes. Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want. And just constantly using your body language, your verbal communication, and some leash handling skills, which I'll get into a little bit on this podcast. It's kind of hard without actually like showing you some slides and us analyzing video together, and then me checking out maybe some of the video that you have working with your dog. And that's in my course. So if you're digging this info, by all means, find out more info about my training course that I do online, and I'll be able to take some of these philosophical and approach-based things and give you a lot more meat and potatoes of implementation and really working on your actual handling skills and delving deeper and answering your personalized questions on that course. Going back to the topic at hand, communication during a training session. I want your dog to eventually start finishing your sentences for you. So as you're going through this like script of verbal body language and leash communication, your dog should just start kind of like anticipating. And that's what you want. And so you're always thinking, what can I wean off of communication wise? And I wonder if it'll still give me what I'm looking for. And so you might do less praise. You might, give your dog an extra second of hang time. If you're saying like break, which means like you can go lead this sit stay, you might not give a little pop on that leash and just maybe disengage with your dog just a little bit to give him a little bit of a tell that like, yeah, dude, it's fair game now. Like just to like give him a little bit of a trigger to jump off on, a little sign that says like, yep, you're good. There's these weaning off points, and really what it is scalability. As I look to become and basically am like a ghost owner of some of my boarding facilities, like not all of them. I'm creating another one now, and so I'm very much involved with that, and I will be. But my goal when I start that is to have an exit strategy. Because if I don't have an exit strategy, I'll get bogged down and I'll never create the careers for the people who are my most tried and true, bleed blue. That's our colors, and my most loyal employees. They'll get to the point where they'll plateau and I might lose them, or maybe they'll continue to stay with me, which would be great, but they won't make what I think they deserve. And so I immediately start any endeavor with, how can I automate this? How can these, how can my team just run my place without me? Like, what are my different points where I'll have connectivity, but not actually have it be like boots on the ground sort of deal. And so for me as a business owner, it's like cameras, it's accounting reports, it's just these different benchmarks. And so you're going to have the same thing as a puppy owner, where you're going to come in and say, okay, I eventually want for my dog just to come and call when I say its name when we're outside. I give my clients initially like a long script. It's literally like 10 to 12 different points that they have to hit as they're doing coming when called. And there's even like nuances in between those points. And it's overwhelming at first. But I sweat the small stuff knowing that if we hit all these little points and I can get someone bogged down and kind of like leaning into the nuances, into that learning curve, that eventually you just have to say your dog's name and it runs over to you. Even better, your dog just never leaves like the radius around you. And when you come up on distractions, it just looks at you and kind of, comes over to you. It just stays in an even closer radius. So that's what I've found with the dogs that I do my off-leash work with, is that when they see a distraction, not only do I just have to like say their name and they know the deal, as long as you always kind of like reinforce it enough. You don't have to continue to train your dog after you make an initial investment, but as long as you stay consistent with it, it's kind of like getting in really good shape, and then at the very least, hitting up the gym enough where you might not be at your peak, at your pinnacle of your athleticism and abilities, but you're never going to get like sloppy. So that's what I kind of do with dogs. I get them really great, and then from there we just coast for life basically, unless we need to brush up on some skills. And then from there we put some things under the microscope again. What starts off as a lot of like different, like all these things you got to worry about, if done correctly, literally just say your dog's name. But most people don't want to get through the nuances, through the script, learn their dog and do all that point. And then they always say, well, he comes and calls in the house. Well, of course he does. So, I mean, you can determine that as to like which level you want to take it. And I can tell you, it's not easy, but it is doable. And when I say it's not easy, it's more the internal attitude that you have to keep in check. If you just keep having I'm going to keep coming back to the well, and learning, and there's two parts of learning, right? You come back to the well and you get some seeds planted. You get shown a couple like tips as to how you can up your game, and then you go back and apply it, and then you learn, right? So there's the there's the like, okay, that makes sense. And then there's the tinkering part. And that's where you'll get more astute at figuring out your dog. And so that's basically all I do is I set you up. I give you a couple pieces of advice, some tidbits. And then from there, I say, go back and mess with it. But that's it. I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to cover today is just some things like that. I went a little bit too ranty than what I would have otherwise liked. But I went over some, I think, very good painting in broad brushstrokes points for you to consider as you're interacting with your dog. And a lot of these points I'm going to come back and I'm going to dissect the heck out of. So I can go as deep into a lot of these otherwise very basic nuanced things that haven't even gotten on your radar. You didn't even think about a lot of this stuff coming into this podcast today, unless you happen to be like a dog trainer where you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yep, I explain the same thing to my clients, but just like a little bit differently. But if you're the average John Doe dog owner, a lot of times all these different little coaching thoughts of how to get more out of your dog, they don't enter your brain. And I need them to at least start to get on your radar, even if you're failing. You might say, oh, I should have done that then. And next time you will, or you'll screw it up next time too. But then the third time, you'll actually keep your dog in that sit stay because you'll read your dog better and you'll respond better. Just as importantly, reading your dog is responding, in a well-timed, nice, light manner. I hope this has you entering your next hands-on food-based training and or if you're a champion puppy training client, training with tug and fetch, where we're going to spend the most of our time doing the obedience work. I hope this has you prepped of mind, of heart, and just looking at your dog through a different lens. All right, tune in next time. I'm going to have some more practical stuff for you to continue to soak up and, most importantly, apply. Remember, champion puppy owners, action over anxiety, discipline equals freedom. Take the next step, do what you know how to do. Drive the puppy training process. Truly commit yourself to this. Hit it hard for a short period of time so you can stop working on your dog and simply enjoy them. I'll see you next time. Peace!